Good morning, everybody. So in this final week of our term, we are going to be looking at poetry. So by the end of the week, you're going to be writing your own poem. And to build up to this, today, we're going to be looking at something that is in all pieces of poetry that you'll ever read, and that's figurative language. Now, figurative language are different types of literary devices that poets use to create images in people's minds, to give them feelings about their poems, and to really let the images that they're trying to get across in their poetry over to the reader. So examples of figurative language are bullet pointed below. So you've got metaphors, where one thing is described as another. For example, you could say the sun is a giant orange in the sky. You've got alliteration, where several words in a phrase or in a sentence start with the same sound or letter. For example, Super Simon swims like a salmon. You could have that, so you've got that S sound repeated. You've got similes, which is where you compare one thing with another using as or like. For example, my dog's fur is like a big fluffy cotton wool ball. You can use personification, which is where you give non-human things features or actions that only humans can have. For example, the haunted house watched me with its broken windows. Well, obviously, can a haunted house watch you? No, it can't. You're giving it that human quality to make it a little bit scarier. You can use onomatopoeia, which is words which sound like the thing they represent, like crash, bang, woof, snap. You can use idioms, which is a common expression which means something different to its individual words. So, for example, the best students reach for the stars. Now, do they physically reach for the stars? No, they don't. What that means is, it means that you're sort of aiming to achieve the best that you possibly can. And then finally, you can use something called a hyperbole, which is an extreme or impossible idea used to gain maximum effect. For example, no, you can't go to the toilet. You've been 20 times this lesson already. Well, really, have they been 20 times? No, they haven't. Hyperboles are used to exaggerate. So they're all literary devices. Now, I've gone through those very, very quickly. The sheet, the activity you're going to do has all of those definitions on for you. So if you're unsure or you need a reminder, go back and look at that. So our writing task for today is to use the activity sheet. So on the first page, it's got those definitions that I've just spoken to you about. And then on the next 3 or 4 pages, it's got lots and lots of different sentences. And all of those sentences can be sorted into either simile, metaphor, personification, alliteration, idiom, hyperbole, onomatopoeia. Ignore the fire alarm in the background, by the way, it's only a drill. So you're going to sort those into those criteria. Now, when you've done that, I'd like you to write in your book each of those bullet pointed headlines, simile, metaphor, personification, and so on. And I'd like you to write 3 examples of each using the sentences there. So you only need to copy the sentences out. Now, as a warning, the answers are on the end sheet in this. Don't look at them straight away. Give yourself a good go, and once you've done your activity, you can mark your own work. Okay, good luck. Morning, everyone. So today we are going to read the poem that we're going to be basing our poetry work on this week. It's called If, by a very famous author and poet called Rudyard Kipling. Now, you may have heard of Rudyard Kipling with writing the stories like the Jungle Book or the Just So stories. He's nothing to do with cakes, so get that out your head. So have a read of that poem and then come back to this PowerPoint. So within that poem that you've just read, obviously there are several verses to it. Rudyard Kipling has used examples of figurative language. He's not used all of the examples of figurative language that we were looking at yesterday, so he's not used them all. But your first task is to identify within that poem the examples of figurative language that he has used. So I want you to go through it. You might need to go back to yesterday's work to look at your definitions of what each sort of example of figurative language means again. So see if you can find, has he used any similes, has he used idioms, has he used a hyperbole anywhere, has he used personification? So go through that poem, that's your first task, and find any examples of figurative language that Kipling's actually used. Now your second task is based on preparing to help you with Wednesday and Thursday's work, where you're going to be actually writing your own version of the poem. Now this poem, If, is written for Rudyard Kipling's son, and it's telling him all of the ways that he can be a man when he's older. So he's a young boy at the time of writing this, and he's telling him, if you do this and you do that and this is the way you treat people and so on, he said, you'll be a sort of a very good man when you're older. Now we're going to use Kipling's idea, and we're going to try and write a poem based on the career that we want to have when we're older. So I suppose if I was thinking about myself, I would be writing it about wanting to be a teacher when I'm older. So it'd be thinking about all the ways in which I could be a good teacher when I'm older. So today, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be writing or coming up with some examples of figurative language that you can pop into your poem. Are there any similes you can think of that could help, you know, I suppose if I'm thinking about myself becoming a teacher, are there any similes I could write? Any examples of alliteration? I might say like a talented teacher or something along those lines. Are there any examples of personification I can think of, and so on? So I want you to come up with some examples of figurative language. I want you to try and find at least one example, or come up with at least one example for each thing here. Now, if you need to, again, go back to yesterday's work, look at those examples that you pulled out, and you can adapt them to help you with to help them fit, I suppose, the career that you would like to have. So they're your tasks for today. All right, everyone. So this slide covers Wednesday and Thursday's work. So what's on this slide and what I'm going to talk to you about will take you 2 days if you are doing it properly. So read the poem If by Rudyard Kipling again, just to remind yourself of it, and do this on both days because you're using that poem as a bit of a template for the work that you're going to be doing. So your task over the next 2 days is to use Kipling's poem as a guide, and you're going to write your own version of If. So your poem's going to be called If, and it's based on what you want to be when you're older. Now remember, this isn't a life commitment. Don't spend too much time stressing about what you want to be when you're older. You're not committing to it now. Don't panic. Just choose a career and you're going to write your poem about it. Now the success criteria for the poem is on the next slide, so make sure you refer to that all the time. I want you to try and get lots of examples of figurative language into your poem. Now that's within the success criteria. Some examples of figurative language are easy to get in, like similes and metaphors. Others are trickier, like hyperboles and idioms that we're only just learning about. So there are different places in the success criteria, but I would like you to have a go at each one. So every day, so Wednesday and Thursday, you're going to write and edit 2 verses of the poem. Obviously it's a 4-verse poem, so you're going to do 2 verses on Wednesday, and when you've done that you're going to edit them, and then same thing on Thursday. And your final verse on Thursday is going to end the same way that Kipling's poem does, and it's going to end with, and which is more you'll be a, but instead of saying a man, you're going to say a teacher or a doctor or a dancer or a footballer or a, whatever it is you want to be when you're older. And you're going to end it with either my son or daughter. It depends who you are. So that's what you're going to be doing. Now, in terms of using or figurative language in your poem, do I expect to see a simile in every single verse? No, I don't. I expect to see at least one simile in the whole thing. I expect to see at least one metaphor in the whole thing. Because if you were to do each one of these pieces of figurative language in every verse, that's all your verse would be, and it would be far too complicated. So decide, before you write these, decide, right, okay, in verse 1, I'm going to start off and I'm going to get a simile in there, and I might get a hyperbole as well. and then I can tick those off. In the next verse, I might try and get some personification and a metaphor. In the third verse, I might try and get an idiom and some onomatopoeia. In the fourth verse, and so on. Okay, you get the idea, so spread it out. And that's about it, really. Remember, editing is crucial, so you want to spell everything correctly. And if you can get a rhyme in there when you're editing it, and that's easier said than done. Remember, poems don't have to rhyme, but if you can get a rhyme in there, I would be very impressed. So good luck, enjoy it, and I can't wait to read them.